have ever been lost in a store, separated from your parents, you know? It happened, I was with my sister one day, and she has 4 children. And all of a sudden, my sister said, "I hear one of my children." And it made me realize that parents know the voice of their children. And that helps me to understand today's gospel when Jesus said, "The sheep hear my voice, and I know them." So stop and think. Jesus knows you. How about that? He knows your name, and He knows your voice. I guess that's a good reason why we should pray, so that He hears our voice over and over and over again on that. But today Jesus is reminding us that He's the Good Shepherd. So the Good Shepherd has an important job. He has to lead the sheep to nice green pastures where there's some grass so that the sheep can eat. And so He's responsible for their safety, but He's also responsible for nourishing and feeding them as well. That's why today, on this 4th Sunday of Easter, we always talk about Jesus, the Good Shepherd. And He's the Good Shepherd of all of us. And He wants to lead all of us to God's kingdom. But above all, He wants to nourish us. That's why we come to this Eucharist. And so today marks a very special day, the beginning of something new in your life. That now you can come each Sunday in order to receive the body and the blood of Jesus to be nourished. You know, if your parents didn't feed you, you'd kind of get hungry, wouldn't you? And what happens when we get hungry? I think we get cranky. You notice that? You know, we get on edge and that, you know. And sometimes I think, spiritually, I think there's a lot of people who are hungry because I don't know, there seem to be a lot of angry and cranky people in the world today. And I think it's because they're not looking after their spirit. They're too busy looking after everything else about their body, but they forget there's something inside of us, that we need love, we need nourishment, we need God, we need Jesus, we need the Holy Eucharist in order to keep us happy and to keep us on a good path. Now, one of the saints talked about Jesus, the Good Shepherd, and he said, we're all following Jesus along the path. But he said there's always a danger that we get too touristy. That is, we're too busy looking at the sides that we forget where we're going. He says, we see a nice meadow on the side and we think, oh, isn't that nice, and that. And then we forget about where we're going and we forget about the path that we're supposed to walk along. And so we need to keep our eyes on Jesus and to know His Word and that. Today then, that's why we gather. And we gather every Sunday in order to receive Jesus, that He's renewed within our hearts and that we follow Him. So how do we hear the voice of Jesus? Well, I don't think you're going to hear Him if you fall asleep and that. But you know, if you stop and think, every Sunday we read the words of Jesus. So you've already heard His Word. Sometimes we have to listen. You know, we hear things sometimes. It's kind of like when your mom or dad calls you and you don't hear them, you know. Well, you did hear them, but you ignore them and that, you know. It's so easy to hear words today. And there's so many words around us today. How do we know what to hear in that? So it takes a very special quality to be able to listen and to hear what Jesus is saying to us. Today's gospel is easy because it's only a little paragraph, very short. I am the Good Shepherd. I know my own know me. And so I hope that as you journey, that you develop this friendship with Jesus, who is the Good Shepherd. You learn to listen to His voice every Sunday. But He wants to hear your voice. And that's why it's important for us to pray and to talk to Jesus as well, so that He hears our voice and He gets to know us, but more importantly, we get to know Him.